Christopher Wray, who's the director of the FBI, is currently testifying before the Congress. This in a hearing that's likely to feature extensive criticism from Republicans. They're angry about how federal law enforcement has investigated former President Donald Trump and current US President Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden. Republicans, particularly pro-Trump lawmakers, have attacked the FBI for what they have labeled politically motivated investigations and charging decisions. Now, they are alleging that the FBI is favoring liberals and unfairly pursuing conservatives. Wray has defended the agency, focusing less on the most politically charged cases and more on the Bureau's overall work fighting terrorism, hacking and other types of crime. Now, the political debates surrounding the FBI come at a difficult time for the Bureau's policy goals. Chief among them is the effort to get Congress to reauthorize a key surveillance authority known as Section 702. Internal reviews have found significant failures and misuses of the digital data collection program in recent years as well. And conservatives in particular have now vowed to not renew the program when it expires at the end of the year. What will this mean for the Democrats and the Republicans? Let's try and get in a sense of perspective. And for that, let me introduce my guests today. I'm joined in by Crystal Knight, who's a Democrat strategist, also joined in by Orlando Sanchez, who's a Republican strategist. I'll quickly go across to Crystal before I go over to Orlando. Crystal, the hearing before the House Judiciary Committee is Wray's first congressional testimony since Trump was indicted. He will also face questions on the investigation into Hunter Biden. Republicans are saying that the nation's premier law enforcement agency is biased because it's favoring the liberals and unfairly pursuing the conservatives. How do you weigh in on Wray's defense when he says that the work of the FBI needs to be looked beyond just political investigations, primarily these two cases?
Well, I think what the gentleman is saying is that he's right. The FBI is an independent entity in the United States. And if they bring a case before the public or before the agency, they have to use their full extent to investigate it. And it doesn't matter who it is, if it's the sitting president, if it's a member of the sitting president's family, or if it's a former president or someone who formerly worked for government. This entity is supposed to be bipartisan, not choose a side in who they investigate and the way that they investigate, but ultimately they are doing the work of the United States and have the interests of the American public.
All right. Then let's also discuss the political debate surrounding the FBI. It comes at a difficult time for the Bureau's policy goals. Chief among them, of course, are the efforts to get Congress to reauthorize the key surveillance authority known as Section 702. But what do you also make of the timing of this Judiciary Committee oversight hearing, not to forget the fact that this is also a significant election year for the United States?
Well, I don't think that there's any perfect time to bring about any investigation, regardless of how close it is to an election cycle or not. People don't want to know and understand that there is an investigation happening surrounding someone who might be sitting in office or someone who was formerly in office. And so I think the Senate is doing their job. We also understand that the Senate is truly bipartisan in that there's no real majority. I think, Vice President Kamala Harris has a swing vote in the Senate, but at this point, the Senate is probably the most bipartisan entity as it relates to Congress, and that Congress is controlled by the Republicans in this country to bring forth this hearing. And they're doing the work of, their jobs and what Americans sent them there to do. The timing on how it works and when it happens, that's not something that the public can control. And oftentimes what we see is that these committee hearings move very, very slowly. And so for it to feel like it is right on the cusp of the presidential election, it is, not the best timing, but it's something that has already been on their agenda and they are just executing on it right now.
All right, Crystal, last but not the least, why are some Republicans calling on the Congress to reduce funding for the FBI? Is that a sensible demand?
Absolutely not. Congress should not call on anyone to reduce the FBI funding when they are continuously increasing defense spending and increasing money that we are sending overseas. The FBI is a government agency, just like many other agencies in this country, and they need a certain budget to fulfill and execute their job. The reason that we see Republicans calling for a reduction in financing or a reduction in their budget is because they don't want the extra bodies that are necessary to carry out these special investigations that are taking place, namely against former President Donald Trump. And so it's really just a hypocritical power play that they are attempting to make, but ultimately it will not go anywhere.
All right, many thanks to you, Crystal Knight, for joining in. Let me quickly bring in Orlando Sanchez, who's a Republican strategist and is now joining me live. Orlando, thank you for joining in. You heard what Crystal had to say. My question was, why are Republicans calling on the Congress to reduce funding for the FBI? Do you think it's a sensible demand?
Well, clearly, with the new director of the Justice Department, Merrick Garland, who was rejected by the U.S. Senate as a member of the Supreme Court, this is all retaliatory in a very partisan situation. So, Merrick Garland has turned the Department of Justice into a weaponized system. Donald Trump does not pose an immediate threat to the national security of the United States. Did he take documents like former presidents have done, former Vice President Pence and even Joe Biden? Yes. Was it necessary to raid his house? No. The FBI has plenty of work to do, including catching drug cartels, people that are defrauding our Medicare system, organized crime in this country.
But all the more
the
reason
fentanyl,
for the FBI to then require funding. Why reduce their funding?
Well, because they have strayed from their mission, which is to go after serious crimes in this country, and have become a political mechanism of the Justice Department through the executive branch of the United States. And as long as they keep doing that, I would expect no different from the Democrats if a Republican president weaponized the FBI to go after Democratic candidates in this country. I would expect the Democrats to defund or lower the funding of the FBI. They have strayed away from their mission. They need to get back to their mission. The FBI in this country has always had the respect of the American people. And we need to get back to honoring and respecting. We honor and respect the work that the agents do. But the leadership of the FBI has become very political in this country.
Right. Orlando, so what you are echoing is perhaps what the Republicans are also alleging. They're saying that the conservatives have been targeted by the nation's premier law enforcement agency. Now, how do you weigh in on Christopher Wray's defense when he says that the work of FBI goes beyond just one or two investigations, and that shouldn't be limited to just these two, and that the FBI's work should be seen in totality?
Well, I don't disagree, but for the last few years under this administration, it has been strictly political. Every time we turn on the mere fact that we are talking about the politicization of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, a worldwide respected organization, today on this newscast, instead of talking about the crime and the serious nature of cartels and money laundering in this country, proves the point. We shouldn't be talking about a few hundreds of documents that Donald Trump had at his house. There were other ways to secure those documents, not use the FBI to raid the home of a former president. It was a huge mistake by Merrick Garland, who is now engaged in retaliatory behavior for the Republicans rejecting him as a potential justice on the U.S. Supreme Court.
All right, the timing of today's hearing is very crucial because this comes at a time when Bureau's policy goals, the chief among them, are efforts to get Congress to reauthorize a key surveillance authority known as Section 702. What do you make of the timing of the Senate Judiciary Committee oversight hearing, keeping that in mind?
Well, again, this has become very political. Remember that the FBI was working very closely with social media platforms, Facebook and Twitter and others, and so that relationship is causing, as we may say, some indigestion for legislators, particularly members of the Senate. And so, again, we've got to get away from using agencies like the Federal Bureau of Investigation, who has had a storied history in the United States, depoliticize it, let them get back to their criminal investigations, and then let's get them funded. I disagree with funding the FBI, but I also urge the leadership of the Justice Department and the FBI to go back to their mission.
Yes, hoping that they do that, and much emerges out of this hearing. Many thanks to you, Orlando Sanchez, for giving me your precious time and sharing your inputs with us.